moderating this webinar together with my colleague, Alexander Loschke. So for those of you who have not been to this Global Network webinar before, this is organized by the Global Network of Data Officers and Statisticians. We use our online discussion group on Yammer to network and to share knowledge on various areas of data and statistics. If you're not a member already, I invite you to join us, and I will share a link to do so in the chat box shortly. Today, I'm delighted to welcome three speakers, Reena Shah from the UN Statistics Division, Vlad Trusca from the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, and Anjali Kisoensingh from the General Bureau of Statistics of Suriname. They will be presenting on the topic of climate change statistics. This webinar will introduce the topic of climate change statistics from three perspectives. First, the global set of climate change statistics and indicators adopted by the UN Statistical Commission at its 53rd session, and its assessment tool and implementation guidelines will be shared by my colleague from the UN Statistics Division. Second, the reporting requirements of the Paris Agreement will be described together with the possible use of the global set in this process. This will be presented by the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. And last but not least, Suriname's experience with climate change statistics and indicators will be presented by the General Bureau of Statistics of Suriname. So let me quickly introduce our three speakers. Reena Shah is the Chief of the Environment Statistics sections of the UN Statistics Division, where she is responsible for the environment statistics and climate change statistics programs. Vlad Trusca is the Manager of Transparency Division of the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. He is responsible for the data, systems, and tools for transparency of information under the Climate Convention and Paris Agreement. Anjali Kisoensingh is a staff member of the Scientific Research and Planning Division of the General Bureau of Statistics of Suriname, where she is responsible for the collection of environment, climate change, poverty, and SDG statistics. Anjali is also the vice chair of the expert group on environment and climate change statistics. Before we proceed, just a few housekeeping reminders. Our speakers will have 35 to 40 minutes to present. We will then have a Q&A session following their presentation. Throughout the presentation, please do feel free to write your comments and questions into the chat box at any time. And during the Q&A session, you are encouraged to ask questions directly by using the raise hand function. Or if you wish, I could also read out the questions on your behalf from the chat. Again, this Global Network webinar is being recorded and will be made available on the Global Network after the event. We invite you to continue the discussions there. And with that, let me now turn over the floor to the first presenter, to Reena. Over to you, Reena. Thank you.
Thank you. I just get my screen shared. Thank you to my colleagues Alex and Panya for having invited us to present at this important webinar. And I'm joined by my colleagues in the Environment Statistics section. This is the outline of our presentation, focusing on the global set, capacity development, national examples, and the expert group on environment and climate change statistics. So to start with, a few slides on the global set. This is a timeline of UNSD's work in climate change statistics, starting back in 2008 and moving along to the adoption of the global set in 2022 at the 53rd session of the Statistical Commission. It should also be noted that the expert group on environment statistics, as it was formerly known, and it supported the work of the global set. It was renamed to be the expert group on environment and climate change statistics, given the increased focus on climate change statistics over the years. And this renaming was approved by the Statistical Commission at its 55th session last year. These are just some of the various decisions of the Statistical Commission regarding the work on climate change statistics. All the links are here. If you're interested in more details, you're welcome to take a look. So the global set was developed by UNSD in close collaboration with UNFCCC and the Expert Group on Environment Statistics. It was adopted as the framework guiding countries to develop their own national sets of climate change statistics and indicators. And it contains 158 indicators and 190 statistics, which link policy targets. These are the 5 IPCC areas known as drivers, impacts, vulnerability, mitigation, adaptation, and statistical indicator frameworks across the Paris Agreement, the Sendai framework, and the Sustainable Development Goals. And the global set helps to define the scope and content of national programs where countries use the global set to develop their own national sets, as well as regional approaches where indicators are adapted or selected, and some examples have been by ECLAC and ESQA. The Paris Agreement contains 29 articles, half of which refer to subject areas or topics which benefit from well-defined and internationally comparable indicators. Yet, however, no such indicators have been agreed by the climate policy community. So this is where the global set can really contribute. And during the planning stage, the global set can help inform on the development of the nationally determined contributions, NDCs, under Articles 3, 4, 5, and 6 that are in green on the slide, and also help inform the national action plans, or the NAPs, under Article 7, addressing vulnerability and adaptation. And in Article 13, that's highlighted in green, specifies the key areas for reporting which require climate statistics, such as the Enhanced Transparency Framework and the biannual transparency reports. And I know Vlad will talk a lot more about the work from UNFCCC point of view. Since there was no framework to link the reporting requirements under the Paris Agreement with the needed official statistics, UNSD and UNFCCC prepared the global set based on the 5 IPCC areas and the framework for the development of environment statistics known as the FDS in Chapter 5, with a tiering system as in the FDS and the SDG indicators. And the global set also provides the links to the SDG and Sendai indicators. The Paris Agreement is in synergy with other international agreements, most of all the Sendai Framework and the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, and the indicator sets under these agreements are well aligned. The main statistical references, including the internationally accepted framework standards and guidelines, are presented in abbreviated form in the last column, and which is called method. And for example, in UNSD work, we have, of course, the FDS, the Framework for the Development of Environment Statistics. We have the IRIS, that's the International Recommendations for Energy Statistics. We have the SIA Central Framework and the SIA Ecosystem Accounting. So there are several indicators that can be derived from these different frameworks and standards. These are examples of the structure in a simplified form with the 5 IPCC areas with a topic selected under each of the areas. And to note, there are 34 topics and an indicator for each of them, as well as the underlying statistic or statistics depending on the indicator. This slide demonstrates an example of a metadata sheet on renewable freshwater resources that are certainly strongly impacted by climate change, particularly in arid regions. And each metadata sheet covers 26 fields, and this slide just has a few of the fields that are contained in each of the sheets. Now moving to capacity development and implementation support. So UNSD, we have a regular program of technical cooperation and development account projects, that's the DA, as you can see in the slide, where we organize national and regional activities on climate change statistics in collaboration with our partners such as regional commissions and international organizations such as UNFCCC and UNEP, and there are several others. I'm just naming a few. The implementation guidelines were developed along the preparation of the global set to support its implementation in application in countries. And the guidelines were recently officially translated into all UN languages and can be obtained from our website. And UNSD, in collaboration with UNFCCC and the expert group, developed the Climate Change Statistics and Indicator Self-Assessment Tool known as the CSAT to support the implementation of the global set of climate change statistics and indicators. And comprehensive self-assessment is needed to define what data exists or is missing in the country. And for this, we recommend that national statistical offices and national focal points reporting to UNFCCC organize and initiate the process using the CSAT. And here are a few examples of the implementation of the global set at the national level. Here is an example of Peru that has applied the CSAT, and it demonstrates the availability of data per IPCC area. As I said, drivers, impacts, vulnerability mitigation, and adaptation, and both in the table and chart. And data for impact indicators are more available, and the least available are for mitigation indicators. Here's another example from Suriname, which our colleague Anjali Kisoensingh will speak to, so I won't say anything on this slide. And here's another example from the Dominican Republic, which has applied the FDS, the ESSET, and the CSAT. These are just a few examples that we chose to put on our PowerPoint, but as you can imagine, there are so many other countries who are using the tools and have been applying the global set. Here's an example from Tanzania, which is the first country in the world, at least to our knowledge, that has included climate questions in their population and housing census. And this was in 2022. And Ms. Ruth Minja, who is responsible for this work from the National Bureau of Statistics of Tanzania, is also the chair of our expert group on environment and climate change statistics. And in Tanzania, they identified that data for 33 of the 158 indicators in the global set can be obtained or informed from the population and housing census. The first pie chart here shows that 88% of the community has knowledge about climate change. And in addition, the biggest impact of climate change perceived by the respondents is the fluctuation in rainfall levels and change in rain seasons. Now to some of the updates of the work of the expert group on environment and climate change statistics. A few words about building and consolidating the program as recommended by the 11th expert group meeting. So the 11th meeting of the expert group in October last year addressed and supported the restructuring effort extensively and recommending several subgroups for prioritized areas of work and a steering group to oversee the process. And our main effort now is on setting up the activities on climate and health, climate and gender, implementation of the FDS and the global set, capacity development and coordination of activities. And the work on the subgroup on climate change questions for surveys and censuses will also be continued. So this subgroup met 6 times last year, compiled materials for a core set of climate change questions for surveys and censuses. And the 7th meeting is actually scheduled for next week. We are developing a guidance document on the use of traditional data collection to inform climate and disaster statistics to be reviewed by the subgroup and considered for publishing. However, the core set itself requires further work. The subgroup on climate and health statistics was recommended by the 11th meeting of the expert group based on group work at the last 3 meetings and the methodological advances under the project, the Standards for Official Statistics on Climate Health Interactions, or the SOCI project, which is led by the UK Office for National Statistics. The subgroup second meeting was held on 20 March this year, in which the subgroup was officially set up with the UK ONS as the chair and WHO as the vice chair. And we have 19 experts in these groups representing countries and agencies and they participate in the second meeting where the draft TOR, including the scope of work and a plan for the review of the indicators, were discussed. This subgroup on climate and gender statistics was also recommended by the 11th meeting of the expert group, based on group work at the last 3 meetings and some of the materials shared in the subgroup on climate questions, as well as work done in collaboration with the interagency and expert group on gender statistics. And we are collaborating with the IAG on gender statistics to review a guidance note that they are preparing on mainstreaming gender into climate change statistics. And one of the main planned activities is under a Development Account 17 project on measuring climate change with the gender dimension for better adaptation and mitigation policies, which is being led by UNEP, but in which UNSD is closely collaborating. And finally, on capacity development and implementation support, we also had a first discussion of interested expert group members on this topic. And this was back in February, and we will continue these discussions with one of the objectives being to try to streamline, coordinate capacity development activities. As we know that there's so many actors and players in this field, we're trying to assist both organizations and countries to try to coordinate these interventions more streamlined to the extent we can. We haven't decided if this is going to be a full subgroup, but we're in the early stages of discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Reena. Let me now give the floor to Vlad for your presentation. Over to you, Vlad.
Thank you so much, Maya and Alex and Reena, for inviting me. Do you see my presentation? Yes. Okay. So again, thank you for the invitation. I know we don't have a lot of time, as you usually need a lot to explain this concept and so on, but I thought it's important to start by presenting a little bit of the context. And first of all, is this understanding, we all talk about the Paris Agreement, and we hear this often. This is just an idea of very schematic of how the Paris Agreement and different articles of the Paris Agreement blend together. And you look, for example, at the middle part where you have the action on adaptation and mitigation, but also the means of implementation. The focus where we will be mostly discussing today is about this accountability part, which is the transparency of action and support, and then with the idea of having this global stocktake once in 5 years. So in terms of the enhancing of the ambition, this is embedded again in the Paris Agreement, and there's this three steps plan in which countries, they have this nationally determined contributions, or NDCs, is the participation of every country into the Paris Agreement. Again, it's important to focus here on this idea of nationally determined. It's what is the parties, the countries under the Paris Agreement propose and plan to do in this fight against climate change. The adaptation communication, their national adaptation plans, and communication on finance. All these things, they start the process with this. And then countries are implementing all these activities, and the process ends with this review part, or this communication and review, which is basically coming from this enhanced transparency framework that we will speak about more, the compliance regime and support to countries to comply, and the global stocktake. Now, if we look at the enhanced transparency framework, again, we have this kind of stepwise approach. As mentioned before, we start from the communication of the nationally determined contributions. And then after the implementation of this nationally determined contribution, you have this important step of the enhanced transparency framework, which consists of the submission of the biennial transparency reports. So once in 2 years, all the countries that are part of the Paris Agreement, they have to submit their greenhouse gas inventory, the information about tracking progress towards their implementing their national determined contribution, information on impacts, on adaptation, and also on the support provided and mobilized by the developed countries and the support needed and received by the developing countries. And then all this information that comes once in 2 years, this is getting reviewed by independent experts. And then there is a consideration of these inputs and the report and the review by all countries together. And this comes every 2 years. And then once in 5 years, you have this global thing that is called the global stocktake that considers what happened in the last 5 years in terms of parties' commitment under Paris Agreement, the way the situation goes with the greenhouse gas emissions, with the adaptation work, with mitigation, and so on. Now, looking at the key elements of these biennial transparency reports, again, biennial transparency reports, the first ones, we are still receiving them. The deadline was 31st of December 2024, so it's just 3 months before. We already have 100 countries that have submitted this biennial transparency report, number one. We are still working with the other countries to submit. And what is in this biennial transparency report? So basically is the narrative part, which you see the thematic chapters, like the greenhouse gas inventory, the progress, the climate change impact, the support. All these are parts of this narrative biennial transparency report. And you see the connection with tables, these common reporting tables or common tabular formats for example, for greenhouse gas emissions, for tracking progress, or for the finance, technology, and capacity building data. So this is a combination of this narrative and tables with data. And then information on flexibility and areas of improvement. This is also part of that. How it works in reality in terms of the greenhouse gas inventory, for example, basically the countries are estimating these emissions through their national system or through this IPCC inventory software. And then there is a connectivity between this estimation tools with the reporting tools that were prepared by UNFCCC to make it easier for parties. And getting this data into the reporting tools, you are able to generate the submission, like all these tables with data that are submitted by countries. And you see here just a screenshot. You see on the right-hand side, the first page of Mauritius' first biennial transparency report. And then you see the tables. For example, on top, you have the sectoral report for energy. This has greenhouse gas emissions only for let's say, for the energy sector. There are many tables. There are like 50 tables for all the emissions of the country. Then in the middle, you have the mitigation policies and measures. These are also tables under the NDC progress. And also the last one, the financial support, one of the tables from the financial support needed by developing countries. So you see, these are just screenshots of tables with data and also the narrative part that the countries are submitting. All these reports and the tables are available on the UNFCCC webpage and are free to download for everyone that is interested. Now, just one minute on these institutional arrangements, because I know that a lot of you are coming from the national statistical offices, and I usually get this information. There is a strong institutional arrangements that are needed for reporting information under the Paris Agreement. And this is something that we are trying to do for some time now with UNSD, is to ensure that there is communication, not only at the international level, but also especially at the national level between the statistical offices and the agencies that are responsible for climate change reporting. And usually this is the Ministry of Environment or the Agency for Environment. But it's important to have this collaboration internally, because there is a lot of data that is needed to be able to report this information on the UNFCCC. And an important point is that the Paris Agreement does not prescribe the institutional setup. There are different ways it works in different countries, and it's important to find the right way in which this data collaboration is happening. Definitely, there is not only opportunity, but I think it's a must, from my point of view, to have the national statistical offices involved in the preparation of the data and the preparation of the reports under the Paris Agreement. So we always plea for this increased collaboration at the national level to be able for countries to report this. Now, I won't say much. Again, we don't have a lot of time. These are some kind of the benefits of the transparency and the reporting of information on the Paris Agreement, both at the national level. You see the political acceptance, the access to support, which is something extremely important, but also in the international level, where it works for countries to build trust among themselves and also to see the international obligations met and so on. Now, a little bit on the indicators for tracking progress in implementing NDCs. We talk a lot about indicators. We work together with UNSD for this global set, and I wanted to show you a little bit more where these indicators are needed. As mentioned, every party on the Paris Agreement communicates its NDC, which is this self-determined by party to provide information to facilitate clarity and transparency and how this NDC is being implemented. And then the party goes and implement the NDC and then reports on its tracking in the biennial transparency report. The information is based on indicators, is based on concrete information of how this has been implemented. And if you look at the indicators, countries need to identify the indicators. Again, there is no prescription of which indicators, how this will be reported and so on, but there is a way to do it. And this is what the countries are supposed to do, to identify the indicator, to provide information for each indicator that was identified, and to provide the most recent information for each indicator. So basically, the countries are supposed to compare steps 2 and 3 to track the progress. And this is for each of the indicators. And here I have some examples of indicators. Definitely, if you look at this kind of groups of indicators, for example, the greenhouse gas emissions and removals, the reduction of greenhouse gas intensity, different qualitative indicators for specific policy and measure, you will find some, if not many of this in the global set. So we also got this question many times, that the global set is something that is mandatory and so on. And it was never meant to be like that. And it's not mandatory. It's just a way to support countries that are providing these indicators to find a way to do that in a simple way. And I'm pretty sure that Reena will come back to this later on during the questions. But that was the idea, that there is nothing mandatory. There's nothing that the countries are forced to do. It's just a way to help them to be able to report indicators, to choose indicators and report them. You see also other types of indicators like reforestation area, renewable energy, carbon neutrality. There are so many indicators that the countries have chosen, and they are reporting them based on their decision. That's it from my side. Again, if you want to find more, you have this, links, the presentations will be available. We have also a LinkedIn group for transparency experts, where we have, I think today I saw that we got 20,000 people into this group. So feel free to reach to us to join this group. And again, thank you for inviting me to speak.
Thank you indeed, Vlad. Yes, after this event, we will share all the presentation on the global network. And now I want to pass the floor over to Anjali, who will be speaking about a country experience from Suriname. Over to you, Anjali. You're on mute, Anjali.
Yes, I'm trying to share my screen. Just give me 1 second.
Thank you.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, I can. Can you put it
Okay.
into slideshow, please?
Yes, I will. Yes, so good morning, everybody. My name is Anjali Kisoensingh, and I work at the General Bureau of Statistics in Suriname, and I'm responsible for environment and climate change statistics, SDGs, and poverty statistics. Today, I'm going to share my experience with collecting data on environment and climate change statistics. So it was a milestone for Suriname to publish their first climate change report in August 2023, following the footsteps of Jamaica and Tanzania. Of course, there are more countries now at this moment. The Ministry of Spatial Planning and Environment, who is the climate change focal point of Suriname, acknowledges the importance of having a climate change statistics
Anjali,
and indicators report. Yes?
and I'm sorry
Sorry?
to interrupt you, but I don't think we see your presentation moving.
It's not moving? Okay, let me try again. Or maybe
You may
you
be,
want to... Is it moving now?
no, can you reshare your screen?
Yes, I'll reshare it. Sorry for that.
It's okay.
Okay,
You may be sharing the wrong screen. That's why it wasn't moving.
Oh, maybe, yeah, it always keeps happening. Okay, sorry for that again. Okay, share. If it's not going, maybe you could share for me. Let me
Yeah, I'll be
hope that
happy
you're...
to. Try one
Yeah.
last time. If it doesn't work, I'll share it on your behalf.
Okay,
Now
do
we
you
can
see
see your
my...
screen. Yeah, but can
And
you put it
if I
into?
go to the next slide, do you see it?
No, it's not moving.
Please share for me. I'm so sorry. Please share for me.
That's fine. I'll do the sharing for you. Just let me
I'm
know
so
when to
sorry,
move the
everybody.
slide.
Yes.
One second.
Yes.
Let me locate the right one. Okay,
Yes,
it's
you can
shared.
see
I hope it shows up.
here. Yes, it shows. You can go to the third page.
This one.
Yeah, this one. Yeah.
Okay.
So
Perfect.
I was just... Thank you. Thank you so much. Like I was mentioning, the Ministry of Spatial Planning, who is the climate change focal point in Suriname, they use this report for their UNFCCC's submissions, and mostly for the mitigation adaptation processes. Having a separate climate change statistical publication makes it easier to make the link with the existing climate change projects of the UNFCCC submissions, like were mentioned before by Vlad, like the NDC, the NAP, the NCs, where having an environmental statistics report is much broader and did not contain some of the social indicators and greenhouse gas data. And also, the GBS contributed to SG 13 in their first PNR report of July 2022. Next slide. The guidelines that we use are, of course, the CARICOM core set, the UNSD, the FDS 2013 framework, which is we see as our environment statistics Bible. Almost 52% of the data we have available. We also use the SDGs because a lot of the indicators are partially environment related, and we have about 37% of data available. And since 2022, we are using the global set of the climate change statistics and indicators. And this has 5 IPCC areas and 158 indicators. You can always find this set online on the UNSD website. Next slide. So I'll talk a little bit about the data availability status for our climate change report. As you can see in blue, those are indicators that we have data for, and in red, we don't have data, and some of the indicators are not applicable, like information about ice cover, etc. So most of the data that we do have available are for the area's impacts and vulnerability. And the ones with less data are for drivers. If you go to the report, I try to collect data for almost every indicator, and if there is no indicator, I also put a note explaining why. You can download this report on the GPS website. It's also available on the UNSC website. Next slide. So our data collection process. It took more than 2 years to produce the climate change report. What we do is in the first quarter, this was of 2022, we send the data request letters to almost circa 50 stakeholders. And in the second quarter, a zero draft report is prepared and presented in an environment and climate change workshop that was held in August 2022. And then we also have a launch. Our launch was in August 2023. I do have to highlight that it is very important that we get funding from the UNDP to be able to host the workshop and the launch. And the climate change and environment statistics reports are both available on the GBS website and the UNSC website. It should be noted that it is very important to recognize that the earlier steps in producing environment statistics greatly facilitated the climate change statistics report. I would like to encourage countries to develop and strengthen their environment statistics, which are necessary for the effective monitoring of key aspects of climate change, and recommended that countries use the FDS 2013 to guide the development of their climate change statistics reports and indicators, giving the very close interrelationship between environment statistics and climate change statistics, and also use the SDGs and other international and regional frameworks. The implementation guidelines of the global set is very important for collecting good quality climate change and indicators, which you can also find on the UNSC website. Next slide. Data collection process. We also have, I try to put the sources that we use. We use a lot of administrative data. Data that we do get in Excel or Word or via email. Almost 80% of all the data is administrative data, but there's also a lot of data from surveys, for instance, the mixed survey, the multiple indicator cluster survey, and also census data, which was mentioned before by Reena. Also, GIS data is very important, especially for forest monitoring. And also if there are environment policy ratified conventions, regulation acts and laws, book studies by universities, and also international websites, databases, and repositories. And census data. The 2024 census that we are now still busy collecting data for contains some climate change related questions, which will provide updates for indicators for the IPCC area vulnerability. And besides our census, we also conducted agriculture census, which will also contain data to monitor the SDGs and also the follow sector climate change data. Next slide, please. On the right side, you will see all the UNFCCC submissions that Suriname submitted from 2005 until 2023. I know in 2024, they are busy with some other reports, but we have submitted our we now have 3 national communication. The last one was submitted in 2023. We have NAPS, we have the NDCs, we have the FRAL, we have NAMA. So Suriname does submit, but we need data, and the Ministry of Environment works very closely with the General Bureau of Statistics in regards of data collection. But what's also very important is that being a member of the EGS, which is now the expert group of climate change and environment statistics, um, it is important to use the CISAT tool. For the FDES, we have the ESAT, but the CISAT tool is a tool that contains all the indicators, and this can help countries or statistical offices to know who might have this data or which is the data. So it's very important to use this tool. And using this tool help contribute data to our third national communication. Next slide, please. We had some challenges since March 2020 when the COVID pandemic hit. It is getting harder and harder for us to collect data from the government. The GBS relies a lot on administrative data, which can result in lower data quality or even no data for some years due to staff turnover. The statistical capacity of the government needs to be enhanced and increased through more training, especially in the metadata, to better understand the FDAS, climate change, and SEG indicators. If the government does not get the training and we send data request letters, we get the answer we don't have the data. So we not only need to train statisticians, but we also need to train more staff at the government. Data collection is very time consuming. Stakeholders need to be reminded constantly via email, phone. Now I also use a lot of WhatsApp. And if they do not reply, I consider myself to be a very polite stalker. I would just come to your office and ask if you have the data. And this got even worse after pandemic. Some of the national data is not processed in the required format or is not disaggregated or very out of date. Think about information by gender or by location. Due to lack of financial and human resources, specialized surveys cannot be conducted. And for now, Suriname does not have an NSDS yet. Next slide. But not everything is bad. There are a lot of opportunities. GBS has a very good collaboration with the government, the private sector, and especially the international organization like the UNDP, and participates in many national, regional, and international environment statistics and climate change workshops and meetings. Since 2016, GBS is a member of the expert group of environment and climate change statistics and contributed actively to the global set of climate change statistics since 2020. Since 2017, GBS is a member of the CARICOM technical group on environment statistics and on SDGs. In 2022, GBS contributed to SDG 13 on climate change. GBS introduced the global set of climate change at the 10th Environment Statistics Workshop. And also GBS contributed to the climate change knowledge database called DONDRO. So we also have a climate change knowledge database, but this needs to be updated. And like mentioned in the first slide, we published our first climate change statistics report. And we are also the vice chair of the expert group. And last year, we published our 11th environment statistics report. Next slide. And I also want to talk about how important this part is, the South-South cooperation through CARICOM. In 2024, GBS in collaboration with CARICOM provided in-country technical assistance activities in the form of a 3-day workshop. They were held in St. Lucia in February 24, in the Bahamas in March 24, and in Dominica in July 2024, under the Center of Excellence project of CARICOM funded by the 11th PDF. And what were the objectives? To exchange experiences, improve capacity of the NSO to fill data gaps using the FDAS, using the global set, and also using the ESAT and CSAT tool. And I hope that maybe by this year, all these 3 countries can present their second publication. Next slide. What were the lessons learned? Quality and availability of data is the most critical issue. Human, technical, and financial resources are very scarce. Environment statistics and climate change statistics should be a priority issue for the government. Otherwise, reporting will remain as an ad hoc action. There is need for more technical capacity, training and metadata and data collection process for the FDS statistics, climate change indicators, and also for the SDGs. We need to strengthen collaboration between NSOs and authorities responsible for environment and climate change to enhance data production, dissemination, and use. And we need to strengthen institutional collaboration in administrative data collection and sharing. The part of sharing is also very important. Sometimes there is data out there, but it's not shared. This will form a sustainable mean of data supply to climate change related policies and programs. Next slide, please. That was my presentation. Thank you so much. Yes, thanks.
Thank you, Anjali, and congratulations to Suriname for the clearly enormous effort you put into putting together this climate change statistics report. I have now enabled microphones and cameras, and I would like to open the floor to all the participants to see if you have any questions for our three speakers. Please use the raise hand function if you have any questions. So I see a couple of questions from our participants in the chat. I wonder if you would like to ask those questions live. Yeah, over to you, Diego. You can unmute yourself and turn on your camera to ask your question.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody from South Africa. My name is Diego Iturralde. I'm in charge of demographic and population statistics at Statistics South Africa. So I'm not an environmental expert of any sort. My question is whether there are any frameworks or guidelines related to measuring the impact of climate change at an individual or household level. I'm looking specifically for types of questions that a country may want to put into a household survey to measure this particular impact. Because very often, and even in the presentations that have been shared so far, we look at indicators that are economic in nature, talking about the cost of climate change or the impact that it may have on a particular industry. We're talking about environmental indicators in terms of emissions, rise in sea level and things like that. And I'm thinking more along the lines of displacement of people. I'm thinking about loss of income, loss of work, those kind of broad individual household level indicators. So I was wondering if there is any work that has been done in this regard at a global level in terms of recommendations at an individual household level. Thank you.
Thanks, Diego. Can I suggest we take maybe one or two more questions before we go to the speakers? Anyone else has a question for our three speakers? So I do see a couple more in the chat. Yeah, Gabriel, please come in and ask your question.
Yes, thank you very much. My camera is not on at the moment, so I'm very sorry for that. But thank you very much for your presentations, and also Anjali's presentation on actually a country experience is always interesting to see what it means for a country to produce this set of indicators. One question to Anjali, because you mentioned also the various data sources that you are using for the production of this set of indicators, but you mentioned data collection, and just to be sure, the data that you are collecting still needs to be processed, correct, in order to align with the definitions of these various indicators, or do you collect data that immediately are compatible? So this is my question. I know that when we speak statisticians, sometimes we just refer to data collection, but actually one of the biggest, I would say, challenge for statisticians is not to collect the data, it's to transform them in order to get the indicators according to international guidelines and definitions. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Gabriel. Let's take those two questions. So over to you, wonder who would be best placed to answer the first question, perhaps either Reena or Vlad, and then the second question would go to Anjali.
Yeah, thank you, Panya. So I think Anjali could maybe also contribute to the first because she's done so many surveys and censuses. But for this one, actually, I wanted to invite my colleague Emil Ivanov, who would like to also contribute. So I asked him if he could, answer to this question. I mean, these are difficult indicators, but to get that level of information that Diego is asking, I know one of the indicators we do have is the number of climate refugees, climate migrants, and persons displaced by climate change. That's one. But Emil, please elaborate a little bit more on this.
Thank you very much. Just to mention, I'm Emil Ivanov, and I work at UNSD in Reena's team. And I'm happy to hear the question from Diego from South Africa, because we are just in the position to produce sort of guidance. We are not yet sure what exactly it will be called. It is based on the work that Reena also mentioned, started last year, overview of questions, climate change, environmental questions that countries have been using in their traditional data collection instruments, all sorts of surveys and censuses, in some cases, population and housing and agricultural. So this allowed us to compile quite a big compilation of such examples. And now the original idea was to establish a core set for which specific, most agreed, and best questions would match specific indicators in the global set. We realized that this will take longer to do, also because many of the indicators in the global set are left at tier 3, so that requires further effort to better understand them, define them, etc. Nevertheless, the good examples from this work can be summarized and distributed in much shorter effort as well. And we are hopeful that in the next month or so, we should be able to get a sort of guidance like that. More specifically, the examples that we have seen on individual and household level, there are such examples from some countries like the UK and the Netherlands, who have been running such surveys according to their needs quite frequently. And there are, of course, other countries. Thank you. I'll stop here.
Thanks, Emil and Reena. Anjali, would you like to answer Gabriel's question about harmonization?
Yes. So Gabriel, we get the data already processed by the stakeholders. We don't get raw data, because even getting that data is hard. And that is why I mentioned data quality. Once you get administrative data, and I'm not talking about raw data, you get it like, when I send the data request letter, I send them a form of how I want the data disaggregated, and they send me that data. It's either in Excel or just in a PDF Words file. I don't know how good the quality is of that data. What I do know is that for the global set of climate change statistics and indicators, there is a manual for every indicator that explains to you how to calculate the indicator. Sometimes you need different statistics, and then you need to divide it either by population or any other statistics to get the indicator. So I used this manual to calculate the indicators. But again, I want to mention that admin data, if it's a data that from a survey that you as a statistical office that you can say, yes, data quality is good. It's like 100% good quality. But if it's admin data, I need to assume it's good quality. Most of the time it looks good, but I use that data and I calculate the indicator myself. So that is how we do it in Suriname. We do not get raw data. We get it processed in the format that we ask. Even getting that is sometimes hard. I hope I explained. Thank you.
Thank you, Anjali. I'll take another round of questions. So if you have any for our speakers, please raise your hands.
Actually, Pana, there is one in the chat that I can take. It says, can we use the satellite satellite imaginary data, especially methane and carbon monoxide, for estimating amount of energy used and emission from solid wastes. For the reporting under the Paris Agreement, the countries decided that the way to do that for all the countries is to use the IPCC 2006 guidelines. So there is a specific methodology that will be used by all countries to be able to report in the same way, to be able to compare, to aggregate the data, and so on. So this is how the process is being done. There is a very detailed methodology of what to use, what kind of data to use, emission factors, and so on and so forth. So this is how everyone has to use the official data coming from statistics and this methodology to be able to estimate greenhouse gas emissions from energy, from waste, from agriculture, and so on. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Vlad. We still have a few more minutes, so I'm happy to take another 2 or 3 questions from the floor, if you have any.
Anya,
Reena, do you have something to add quickly?
Yeah, well, just I'm seeing another comment in the chat. It's not a question. It's from the ILO, Valentina Stoveska. She said that they've developed a set of climate change questions on the impact of climate change and environment on jobs that they're going to be included in labor force surveys. So we're just very interested in that, and we would like to make contact with her. And I see our chair of our expert group, Ruth Minja, has already commented on that, because we're very excited to bring that information into our subgroup that we are meeting actually next week. So maybe she could put her email somewhere, or because we don't know her, so we can make contact.
Yeah, sounds good. So Valentina, if you could share your contact, that would be most appreciated. I see another hand going up, so I'm going to allow Indira to ask her question. Indira, you on mute still. Can you unmute yourself and ask your question?
I'm sorry, it was an error. Sorry, panel.
Oh, no worries. So since there are no hands, maybe I will ask a couple of questions from the registration form, just to be fair to people who pre-submitted their question. I think one question that is very interesting is about how environmental statistics are considered to be less important or less significant for developing countries. And the person who submitted the question asked, how might the indicators framework for climate change statistics be improved and integrated with most crucial SDG indicators? I think the premise of the question is that people pay more attention to the SDGs oftentimes. So how do you link those two and make sure that climate change statistics also get the attention that it deserves? Anyone of the 3 speakers may want to say a couple of words about that?
Anjali, would you like to take this one? We had shared that yesterday because Panya had given us the questions. If you'd like to. You're muted, Anjali.
Sorry that I was muted. Yes, I would like to answer that question. Sorry, it was a question about the climate change, if it will be useful, right, Reena?
Yeah, how might the climate change statistics be integrated into the SDGs, for example? So,
as I mentioned, almost 60% of all the SDGs, maybe even more, are either fully environment related or partially environment and climate change related. So many of, let's not say many, a lot of the SDGs are also part of the global set. If you would go through the global set, you will see that some of the indicators, they are probably split by area, are just SDG indicators. So they are aligned. That's why if training is provided for climate change to statistical office or to government stakeholders, we should always also give training in the SDGs. And you have the metadata. The UNSD website has all the metadata on how to calculate the SDGs, or at least to know which are the sources. So they are aligned, and you will find plenty, especially when it comes to forest data, fishery data. Almost in every sector of the SDGs, you will also find some of them in the global set and also in the FDES. So 100% they are aligned and they are important. So I hope that answers your question.
Thanks, Anjali. I see Emil with your hand up as well. Emil, you want to say a few words?
Thank you. I can complement the same question, emphasizing that there is quite a massive synergy between the SDGs and the Sendai framework and the global set of climate indicators already. We always emphasize that. Specifically, 51 of the SDGs have been replicated in the global set. From what we know most familiar, goal 13 is specifically on climate, but many others relate especially to various aspects of vulnerability and adaptation. That's one point. The other point was that we have here in attendance friends and colleagues of mine from the past, and one of them can provide extra light on the question on can we use remote sensing to monitor methane from solid waste and such processes. Vlad already gave us the reporting aspect of it. So if you allow a minute or two, may I invite a former colleague of mine to give us some scientific reflection on the subject?
Yeah, definitely. So for maybe a minute or so.
I would like to invite Betsabe de la Barreda. She's working at the University of Nottingham. Take the floor, Betsa, please. We heard you. We hear you.
We hear you.
Yeah. Yeah, like I'm Betsabe de la Barreda, and I work at the University of Nottingham, and we are working on estimated methane emissions from the Arctic. So using remote sensing and using Sentinel-1 and Sentinel-2, and also with drone data. And I think remote sensing is a really powerful tool to monitor this, and that it could help a lot, like all these estimations at a regional, national, and also like in large scale areas, for example, on accessible areas that, as we know, like all the Arctic environments, but then also a lot of tropical forests and stuff are inaccessible, and remote sensing could provide a really great tool to do this. And so yeah, I hope it complements somehow the question. And thank you, Emil.
Thank you very much for your contribution to this. I'm afraid that we are running short on time. We about 4 or 5 minutes over. This is such a rich and important topic that I hope to be able to do a similar global network webinar again in the future so that we can have more discussion. But for now, I really am very grateful for Reena, Vlad, and Anjali for taking their time out of their busy schedules to make their presentations and to give us some idea on the tools and the frameworks that are available for countries that would like to do more on climate change statistics reporting. And thank you to everyone for joining us today. We're grateful that you are able to join us. For those of you who are able to, can I ask for a small favor? Turn on your camera and unmute yourself and join me in giving our speakers a huge round of applause. Thank you, Reena. Thank you, Anjali. Thank you, Vlad.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Yes.
Thanks, everyone, and hope to see a lot of you in the next Global Network webinar in a couple of weeks. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Have a great
Bye.
day.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.